If you're searching for a way, come along. NLP radio will keep you strong, step by step, in a silent song. Your pain fades out, the light comes on.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're really getting into how you can unlock the hidden potential of your brain using the materials you've given us as our map.
Absolutely. And our goal here really is to unpack all the ideas presented in those sources. We'll use this kind of question and answer format, peeling back the layers, to really get to the heart of how you can access your mind's full power. We're committed to exploring every angle mentioned.
Okay, great. So the information kicks off talking about just how busy our brains are, constantly active, even when we think we're chilling out. What's the real significance of all that mental chatter, and why is quieting it down framed as like the essential first step to unlocking these hidden brain powers?
Well, that constant stream of thoughts, think of it as mental static, like background noise. It prevents the brain from getting into these more advanced states of awareness, these more productive states. It eats up energy. So yeah, achieving some mental stillness, some quiet, it's really seen as the prerequisite, the foundation for any kind of mental awakening.
Right, the foundation. And the material suggests a way to start is by just watching your thoughts, observing them without engaging. How does someone practically, begin to do that? Just watch. It sounds simple, but maybe not easy.
It is simple in concept, yeah, but it takes practice, consistency. Find a quiet spot first off, close your eyes, gently focus on your breath, just the feeling of breathing in, breathing out. Now, thoughts will come up, that's normal. The trick is to just notice them, maybe give them a little mental nod like, okay, thought, and then gently guide your focus back to the breath. Without judging, without following the thought down a rabbit hole, you can even mentally say, I am here now, to anchor yourself.
Okay, a gentle redirection. And what's actually going on inside the brain when we manage to get even a few moments of that quiet? What's the neurological shift?
That's where it gets interesting. The brain starts to shift how it uses energy. Those parts normally buzzing with automatic thoughts, they quiet down. And that frees up resources. It allows other regions, ones linked to creativity, intuition, deep stuff. It lets them become more active. It's kind of like the brain switches modes from just processing info to being more receptive, open.
It's like freeing up RAM on a computer.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. Closing down the background noise so the main event can run better.
The materials call this mental silent to natural state. But if it's so natural, why does it feel so, unnatural sometimes? So difficult to get to in our busy lives?
That's a really common feeling. We've just become so conditioned to the constant noise, haven't we? External stimulation, internal chatter. This silence, it connects us to deeper layers within ourselves. It's about experiencing things directly without the need to label or analyze or fix everything instantly, free from that judgment. So it's not inherently difficult. It's just we've forgotten how. We've built up these habits of noise. It's more like remembering, maybe.
Remembering, I like that. And there's this key insight mentioned, realizing thoughts are just tools, not our masters. That seems huge. How does that shift in perspective actually change our relationship with our own mind?
Oh, it's fundamental, absolutely fundamental. Recognizing that separation, that thoughts are tools, that's the beginning of conscious control. Your brain stops being this, unquestioned boss dictating everything and starts becoming this incredibly powerful, intelligent tool that you can learn to direct. It puts you back in charge, essentially.
Right. And the materials also brought up using our senses, like the sound of rain, the smell of earth, as aids to reach silence. How does that work? How can simple sensory stuff help?
Sensory experiences are powerful anchors to the present moment. See, thoughts tend to wander, right? Past regrets, future worries. But your senses, they're always now. Feeling the warmth of the sun, hearing the rain. It pulls your focus out of the mental chatter and into direct, immediate experience. It grounds you, helps you return from that abstract mental space back to here.
Okay, grounding, that makes sense. And the advice was not to force the silence, but to let it happen gradually. Why is that gentle approach better than trying to strong-arm your thoughts into shutting up?
Because forcing often creates more tension, more resistance. It's counterproductive, like trying to smooth water by slapping it. When you allow silence to emerge naturally, even for brief moments, the brain registers that state. It learns it, and that makes it easier and quicker to access next time. It's like strengthening a muscle. Gentle, consistent practice works better than sudden, forceful effort.
Building that silence muscle.
Oh.
Okay. And finally, for this part, the text links this mental silence to absolute awareness and different brainwave patterns.
Yeah.
What are some potential benefits of regularly dipping into these deeper states? What could someone actually expect to gain?
Well, accessing these states means the brain goes beyond its everyday circuits. It can tap into patterns like brainwaves associated with deep sleep or very deep meditation, but while you're awake, this can open up connections to the unconscious. Think deeper memories surfacing, flashes of intuition, sudden creative bursts, maybe even abilities we don't normally tap into. Practically speaking, regular practice often leads to less anxiety, sharper decision-making, and just feeling like your mind is working with you, not against you. An ally.
An ally, not just noise. Okay, let's move to the second section. It starts with this idea of consciously separating from the external world. Not escaping, it says, but rediscovering oneself. What does that initial decision to be quiet with your whole being really mean in practice?
It's a very deliberate choice. It means consciously stopping, even temporarily, focusing on what's out there. Other people's opinions, what they want, the news, social media, all of it. You intentionally turn off that external feed to create space for self-exploration. The text uses that powerful metaphor, a brief death, to allow a new beginning.
A conscious turning inward. Okay. And then it talks about shutting down senses, starting with sound. How do we learn to handle noise without getting sucked in?
Again, it's not about forceful blocking. It's more about observing how you can let sounds pass through your awareness without grabbing onto them. Notice them, acknowledge them, but don't follow them. As that external noise recedes in importance, your mind naturally starts listening more closely to itself, to the inner landscape.
So let's focus on the external sounds, more on the internal.
Okay.
Then it shifts to light. Inviting darkness. Why reduce light? What's the purpose of darkness here?
Even subtle light keeps the mind tethered to the external physical world. Darkness, maybe not pitch black, but undisturbed dimness encourages your focus to turn fully inward. It helps the brain experience itself from the inside out, you could say, rather than primarily through perceiving external things.
Like closing the curtains to focus.
Precisely. It minimizes visual distraction and allows that internal gaze to deepen.
And as colors fade and shapes merge in dim light, how does that visual shift help release the mind?
As the brain stops working so hard to define distinct forms and colors, it becomes more comfortable with the formless, the ambiguous. The focus shifts from seeing, which depends on external stuff, towards a kind of inner understanding that's born from that silence. Less processing, more receiving.
Interesting. And then time becomes meaningless. Why does detaching make us lose track of time, and how is that actually a good thing?
When you disconnect from the usual external cues, the clock, the sun, daily routines, the mind's reliance on those timekeepers weakens. This allows it to enter a state of timelessness. Past and future fade, leaving only this very intense present moment. And that loss is a gift. It opens up access to a much deeper experience of the now.
A deeper now. How is this expanded now different from just, the present moment we usually think of?
Usually we experience the present as this fleeting instant, always rushing towards the future. In this detached state, the now expands. It becomes vast. It's described as the state where the brain holds its real power, where true decisions, peace, understanding, they arise from this present, the one revealed by silence.
So the power is in the expanded present. What about internal rebuilding? What happens neurologically when we disconnect like this?
Well, the old pathways, the ones tied to reacting to external things, they start to quiet down from lack of use, essentially. And new or maybe less used pathways connected inward get a chance to activate, to strengthen. They've always been there, perhaps, but overshadowed. Detachment lets them breathe.
Giving the inner pathways a chance. And in this separation, the brain supposedly stops defending, judging, analyzing. It just observes. Why is that non-judgmental observation so significant?
It signifies a shift to pure awareness, an awareness that isn't driven by the ego's need to protect or categorize, but by a deeper desire for awakening. It's not just having open eyes, but an open mind, ready to see, hear, understand what's really there without automatically resisting or filtering it.
An open mind, not just open eyes.
Okay.
And this section wraps up with experiencing one's pure presence. What does that feel like, and how is that the start of a new power?
It's described as experiencing yourself directly without the usual labels or rules, just a sense of being, silent, clear, maybe even weightless. And that moment marks a shift because the brain starts learning to find answers from within its own silence, not just relying on external input. The mind becomes more actively engaged in the silence, not just passively calm.
Finding answers within. Okay, now part 3 introduces this mental guide residing in the silence. What is this guide? Is it different from just our regular awareness?
It's presented as something deeper. Something beyond our everyday thinking mind. It resides in the stillness, observing, waiting. It's framed as maybe a forgotten part of ourselves that comes forward when we're seeking understanding beyond just facts and figures. More intuition, perhaps. Inner
It's a
wisdom.
deeper aspect. Okay. How do we see or hear it? Does it talk to us in sentences?
Apparently not usually in straightforward sentences. No, it's more about inner seeing, inner listening, cultivated through that stillness we talked about. A mind filled with chatter will likely miss it. It communicates more through symbols, images, maybe persistent feelings or scenes that just resonate, you know?
Symbols and images. Okay. And we might just feel its presence initially. What's that like and how should we react? Should we try and figure it out?
The feeling might be subtle, like a sense that something or someone is there just behind your thoughts watching. And the advice is crucial. Don't get scared, don't try to control it, don't immediately jump to interpret it, just allow it, observe it. Allowing its movement, its presence is seen as the start of its awakening. Curiosity, not control.
Allow it. Why do many people never encounter this guide then? Is it rare?
The text suggests it's not absent, it's just obscured. By our constant mental striving, analyzing, judging, resisting, the guide doesn't tend to show up when the mind is in that busy, defensive mode. It's ready for a mind that chooses moments of quiet receptivity. So it's about the inner conditions.
Creating the right conditions.
Yeah.
The analogy used is a lantern in a dark forest. How does the guide fit into that? Is it the light?
No, the guide isn't the lantern, which is like knowledge or information. The guide is described as the one who tells you where to shine the light. It shows you which path needs illumination. It doesn't walk it for you, but it directs your awareness, initiates a different kind of seeing from within.
Ah, okay. It directs the light.
Yeah.
So what happens to our big questions when we connect with this guide? Does it just hand us the answers?
Maybe not direct answers in the way we expect, but often the questions themselves start to feel less important, less urgent, because a deeper sense of knowing starts to grow. A trust that doesn't need logical proof. It's more about developing inner certainty than getting external validation.
Knowing without reason. Interesting. And what forms can this guide take? You mentioned images, but can it feel like a voice?
It could, yeah. Maybe like your own voice, but wiser. Or like a kind parent or an innocent child. Sometimes a voice that feels familiar, but you can't quite place it. It might show up in dreams, too, or just in that quiet space between thoughts. It seems quite varied.
So be open to different forms.
Yeah.
What's the key attitude needed to keep that connection going?
Belief without needing proof seems crucial. Trusting the process. The text warns that too much analysis can push it away. Silence and acceptance. A kind of respect for this deeper part of the mind, even if the logical part doesn't fully get it.
Silence and acceptance. And how does connecting with this guide affect our decisions and emotions day to day?
The main shift seems to be feeling less alone, less driven purely by fear or calculation. There's this sense of an inner companion, observing, guiding, maybe even warning gently. Decisions might feel more grounded, less reactive.
Less fear-driven. And finally, this guide is linked to accessing hidden brain capacities. How does this interconnection help us learn or develop new abilities?
It's less about raw power or more data, and more about mental harmony. A mind aligned with its guide knows better when to be quiet, when to act, when to observe. Timing improves. It fosters trust in a part of yourself beyond just your past experiences. This can lead to changes in behavior, spontaneous insights, or courage that maybe reading a book couldn't teach you. Inspiration, innovation, they often come from that aligned state.
Alignment, harmony. Okay, section 4 talks about that state between sleep and wakefulness, the hypnagogic state, sometimes called. What happens to consciousness there?
Yeah, that liminal space, the boundaries of normal consciousness get really blurry there, very fluid. The brain isn't operating under its usual logical commands. The limitations we impose through analysis and thought, they tend to dissolve. It's a part of the brain, it seems, that responds more to images, metaphors, paradoxes, not linear logic.
Images and paradoxes.
Yeah.
What kind of experiences or imagery does the mind encounter in that state?
Often very symbolic. Deep, sometimes complex images or feelings. You enter this kind of dreamlike world where things aren't fixed. There can be a strange sense of being both you and not you, like hearing yourself from outside yet feeling separate. It's a real sense of freedom from usual limits.
Freedom. How does the mind process information or gain insights when logic is suspended like that?
Instead of reasoning it out step by step, the mind seems to absorb or feed on these images and feelings directly. This allows it to delve deeper, accessing parts of the inner world and potentially areas of the brain that are normally silent or unused during waking logic. Insights might come as sudden flashes, brief images, or sensations.
Accessing silent areas. Why is this specific in-between state considered so significant for tapping into unused potential?
Well, our waking brain is often focused on the tangible, the rational, the immediately applicable. This state allows the brain to attend to those overlooked parts,
Yep.
parts that might store vast amounts of energy, creativity, intuition, things that don't fit neatly into our logical boxes. They get a chance to express themselves in new ways here.
Right. The text uses this phrase, silence becomes a flame in this state. What could that mean in terms of brain activity?
I interpret that as meaning those moments of seeming nothingness, the quiet gaps, are actually when the brain can penetrate its own depths most effectively. The silence isn't empty, it's potent. It illuminates previously dark, inactive areas. It leads to a kind of awareness and knowing that's just not accessible when you're fully awake and analytical, like opening doors.
Opening doors. How does our perception of reason and understanding shift in this space? Does logic just disappear?
It's not that logic disappears entirely, but it's no longer the only guide, or even the main one. Old concepts can be seen from completely new angles. You might realize that beliefs you held firmly were just limited mental constructs. Understanding starts to transform into a deeper form of inner knowledge, less reliant on external proof.
Inner knowledge. These moments are described paradoxically as losing oneself, leading to returning to oneself. Can you unpack that a bit?
It points to the fluidity of the state. By letting go of the fixed self defined by logic and past experience, losing oneself, you open the door to fundamental change. You can reshape consciousness, create new ways of understanding yourself and the world, returning to oneself but transformed. Accepting these shifts without needing a logical reason is key to growth in this space.
So letting go allows transformation. What are the broader impacts of this kind of brain awakening beyond just mental shifts? Does it affect our whole being?
The changes are often felt throughout your entire being, yes. It's about accessing resources, energy, creativity, resilience that were always within but inactive or hidden. So it brings not just new knowledge, but potentially new abilities or ways of operating in daily life that you didn't know you had.
New abilities. The brain in this state is also likened to a spring, sometimes dry, sometimes overflowing. What's the importance of accessing this inner spring?
It highlights that these silent inner resources are full of potential. They're not static. Paying attention to them, learning to access this spring, can genuinely transform your life by tapping into that inherent renewable source of inner richness.
Okay, tapping the inner spring. Now, Chapter 5 talks about the brain being like a complex lock and how relying only on a logical lens limits us. How does logic act as a lock?
Well, if the brain only responds to what fits its current logical framework, what's understandable and rational based on past experience, then it's locked out of vast territories. It prevents access to many potential abilities, different modes of awareness, a wider reality that doesn't conform to simple cause and effect. Logic becomes a gatekeeper, sometimes too restrictive.
A restrictive gatekeeper. The text then throws out this provocative question. What if our perceived reality is just a kind of dream our inner workings create? What are the implications of even considering that?
Whoa, yeah. That really challenges our fundamental understanding, doesn't it? It forces us to question the solidity of reality and how we might access other realities, other ways of knowing that exist beyond our current, possibly limited framework. Are our beliefs and experiences only partial truths?
Partial truths. And what if the brain isn't just a tool we use, but something that actively constructs us, constructs our sense of self? How does that challenge us?
That shakes the very foundation of the logical mind. If the brain is constructing me, then who am I really? What remains if that construction changes? It pushes us to look beyond purely logical filters, to explore how we can step outside that construction into maybe realms of pure awareness or untapped creativity.
How does the brain react when it's hit with questions like these, questions that don't really have neat logical answers?
It enters a different phase. Logic can't lead anymore. It hits a wall. And these kinds of questions, the ones that challenge fundamental assumptions about thought, identity, reality, they can actually force the brain to forge new pathways, to open up possibilities beyond its usual routines. They stimulate creativity.
Forcing new pathways. The text compares these unanswered questions to cracks in the mind's structure. How do these cracks let new awareness in?
Those cracks represent the breakdown of rigid logical confines. When the old structure is challenged, gaps appear. And through those gaps, new light, new awareness, creativity, insight can emerge. The mind is nudged into the unknown, where logic takes a backseat to intuition and novel connection.
So the goal isn't necessarily to answer the unanswerable questions.
Exactly. The goal seems to be less about finding answers and more about using the questions themselves as tools. Tools to provoke the brain, to push it beyond its familiar boundaries. It's about creating situations where the brain has to react differently, allowing it to access a new world of understanding and creativity that logic alone couldn't reach.
Using questions as tools. How specifically do they help break the lock of logic?
Each unanswerable question acts like a little jolt to the system. It challenges the brain's assumptions, its reliance on established patterns. It pushes the brain to step outside its comfort zone, to open itself to possibilities previously dismissed as illogical or impossible. And in that opening, new forms of ability, new dimensions of awareness can emerge.
New dimensions. So ultimately, what's the desired outcome of pushing the brain beyond logic and analysis this way? Where are we trying to get?
The aim is to give the brain the chance to enter a realm where creativity and awareness flourish freely, unconstrained by old limitations. It's about using provocative questions to dismantle those ingrained mental structures, leading to a wider world, new growth, transformation. Breaking the lock opens the door.
Opening the door,
Yeah.
okay. Section 6 introduces narrative storytelling as the hidden language of the brain. Why is the brain supposedly so receptive to stories, more than just facts?
It seems the brain finds stories inherently engaging. It kind of escapes logic's grip when immersed in a narrative. Think about it. Humans have used stories forever, right? To survive, make meaning, pass down wisdom. Even our daily chats are full of little stories. The mind responds deeply to feeling, imagery, metaphor, emotional arcs, things that stories excel at, often more than dry facts and figures.
Yeah, we are storytelling creatures.
So,
The text says the brain is always making narrative, even in dreams. What's the purpose of these internal stories, especially the weird dream ones?
it seems the brain uses narrative behind the scenes to make sense of things, especially complex or tangled emotions. It processes stuff non-linearly through a story. Even a dream that seems totally bizarre can leave you feeling resolved about something upon waking, right? It's like the brain is healing itself, finding solutions hidden in symbolic narratives, maybe using a single image or sound to construct a whole meaningful arc.
Healing itself. Why does the brain prioritize feeling over logical understanding when it comes to stories?
Because feeling often carries a deeper, more potent message than pure logic. Feeling is where the potential for real change often lies. You can analyze a problem logically forever and get nowhere, but framing it as a story, feeling the emotional journey, that can shift your whole perspective and create internal movement. Feeling motivates.
Feeling motivates. How can storytelling be used consciously as a tool for healing or reframing past negative experiences?
Narrative is incredibly powerful here. It lets us reconstruct past wounds, reinterpret experiences. We can shift from being the victim in our story to being the hero, the survivor, the learner. By changing the viewpoint of the story, we can literally rewrite our past emotional impact. Turning pain into a story of growth creates new neural connections. Each retelling can lessen the emotional charge. It's liberating.
Rewriting the past through narrative. The chapter suggests narrating experiences differently, using more evocative, maybe metaphorical language. How does that change our self-understanding?
Using richer language, metaphors like describing loneliness not just as sad, but as, say, a child in a cold mountain dwelling. It shifts the mind. It moves it from a purely analytical mode into a more poetic, receptive state. Defenses lower. Deeper information, perhaps from the subconscious, can emerge. Metaphorical narrative acts like a key to hidden layers.
A key to hidden layers.
Yeah.
What about creating story characters for different parts of ourselves, like the inner critic, the inner child? How does that help?
Personifying these aspects, giving the inner critic a voice, letting the wounded child speak. Hearing from the inner sage, or the fearful part, allows for a different kind of inner dialogue. Imagining their conversations can reveal insights and answers that straight logical thinking might completely miss. The mind isn't just a calculator, it's a playwright, a director.
A playwright, okay. Why is meaning itself so crucial for the brain? And how does narrative help create it?
The brain seems wired to seek meaning. It needs it to thrive, to make sense of experience. And narrative is the primary way we create meaning. Two people can go through the exact same event, but their internal narratives about it determine whether they grow or stay stuck. We're constantly creating stories about ourselves, the world. We should pause and ask, does my current story empower me or weaken me?
That's a powerful question. And if the story is weakening us, what power do we actually have to change it?
We have the absolute right, the text suggests, to rewrite those weakening narratives. There's no cosmic rule saying we have to keep repeating old, painful stories. We can choose a different interpretation, construct a new ending, focus on different aspects. The mind tends to obey the narrative we feed it. We are the creators of our meaning.
We are the creators. So when the mind feels stuck or haunted by the past, what's the narrative-based approach suggested?
Instead of just trying to forget or endlessly analyzing why, try narrating it consciously. Maybe write it down, tell it to someone, or even just reconstruct it mentally like a film, but perhaps from a different character's viewpoint, or with a focus on the lessons learned. It's presented not just as an exercise, but as a powerful act of transformation.
An act of transformation. Moving to chapter 7, it talks about encountering a silent, powerful force deep within the mind, beyond thoughts and feelings. What is this inner power?
It's described as a presence, a raw, potent force found in the deepest silence. It's not easily categorized as just a thought or an emotion. It's not something easily accessed or even understood by the everyday mind, but it's presented as an inherent part of the brain, waiting to be awakened. The source of true, original power.
Original power. At what point of self-awareness might someone encounter this? And what makes it different from just strong emotions or convictions?
It seems to be at a point where even thoughts, moods, and imaginings are temporarily set aside. A boundless point, the text calls it. What's left is just this, power itself. Unlike everyday feelings, it doesn't seem to speak or fluctuate wildly. It's described as like an inner child, deep within, needing no validation, just waiting for recognition.
An inner child. The text calls this power the heart of the brain and links it to this inner child. What potential does this child hold?
Immense potential, apparently. The potential for change, transformation, achieving greatness, both internally and externally. It's the heart, where thoughts and feelings might merge into something more fundamental, where truth exists without pretense, a silent center of power, accessible through deep inner exploration.
The third eye concept comes up here too. What does this eye see that our physical eyes don't?
The third eye is symbolic, of course. It represents perception beyond the purely material world. It looks towards other dimensions of reality, perhaps. It observes inner truth with clarity, seeing beyond surface appearances. It allows that inward journey to discover these dormant powers.
Inner truth. What about the speaking mirror mentioned? What kind of truth does it reflect?
This isn't a physical mirror, but a metaphorical one reflecting our deepest inner truths. Its speech is silence, conveying that ultimate truth lies in that silence. It shows us a self-image formed not by fleeting thoughts or daily moods, but by our core being. It reflects only what's truly deeply within, not dwelling on the past, but revealing the present essence.
Reflecting the essence. How are we guided to this inner point where this raw, silent power awaits? Does something lead us there?
We're guided, it seems, by the process itself, the quieting, the detaching, the inner listening. We arrive at this inner point where this raw, speechless power resides. It's not imposed from outside, it's already within, untouched by others. A silent potential, felt and known only in that inner silence. Like seeds deep underground, waiting for conscious awareness to awaken them.
Seeds waiting. What is the true nature of the self we meet when we confront this inner power? Is it still us?
Confronting this power is encountering the true self, the text suggests. A being that's always been there but maybe never fully acknowledged or understood. This inner power, this true self, can't really be captured or limited by words. It can only be touched, experienced through that deep conscious inner work.
Experience not described. What kinds of abilities or potential might be unlocked when this inner power awakens? What could change?
The awakening is said to unleash abilities previously unknown or dormant. It opens up a world of possibilities beyond just learned skills. Something inherent, innate, that was always ready, just needing to be realized and activated through this deep connection.
Innate potential. What's the ultimate impact on our lives once we understand and connect with this core inner power?
Life is profoundly transformed, is the claim. Old worries and doubts tend to fade because you're connected to an inner strength that doesn't need external props or validation. It gradually influences everything, growing stronger in that inner silence and peace. It becomes the bedrock of your being.
A bedrock. Okay, chapter 8 shifts gears to rewriting mental programs. It compares the brain to a computer with programs running our behavior. What are these programs and why are many faulty?
These programs are essentially ingrained patterns. Habits of thought, feeling, behaving. Often they stem from past negative experiences, mistakes, fears, things that got etched into our subconscious. And many are faulty because they're based on old data, old wounds, and they keep running automatically, leading to limitations, repeated mistakes, lack of progress. Outdated software, basically.
Outdated software. The chapter says we can reach a point where we can change these programs by looking at the past differently. How can bad memories become strengths?
By revisiting those painful memories, but not as the victim you might have felt like then. Instead, you revisit them from your current perspective, ideally, as a more powerful, compassionate, accepting self. In that revisited moment, you can consciously replace feelings of guilt, fear, or regret with understanding, strength, forgiveness, acceptance. You recognize the lessons learned. This reframing helps free the brain from those old, limiting neural patterns.
Reframing the past. How does doing that actually change the commands the brain sends out now?
Because memories are stored as part of our identity, the brain constantly references them, issuing commands that affect our current behavior and emotions. By changing how you view the past event, you change the memory's emotional charge and meaning. You alter those mental commands. Gradually, this leads to different emotional and behavioral responses in the present. For instance, recalling a past failure might now trigger feelings of resilience and learning instead of shame. The brain gets guided towards more positive commands.
So rewriting mental programs essentially means changing how our brain reacts to its own stored history.
Exactly. You're changing the brain's learned reactions to past experiences. This leads to new emotions, different beliefs, more adaptive behaviors that align better with who you are now, not who you were then. The brain is incredibly plastic. It's like programmable software that can be updated.
Programmable software. The text suggests this isn't just a purely mental thing. How are the brain and body connected in this transformation?
Oh, they're deeply interconnected. Mental shifts directly impact physical sensations, posture, energy levels, emotions felt in the body. That's why changing your attitudes and beliefs, rewriting those programs, can lead to such significant changes in your actual life. Behavior, relationships, even physical well-being sometimes. Mind and body influence each other constantly.
Mind and body together. What roles do acceptance and forgiveness play in this rewriting process? Is it okay to struggle with it?
They're vital. Self-compassion is key. Allowing yourself to have made mistakes, accepting that rewriting takes time and effort, that's crucial. Being kind to yourself during the process, forgiving past versions of yourself helps dissolve resistance and makes it easier to overcome those old patterns. Small, consistent steps are better than demanding instant perfection.
Small steps, self-compassion. What's the fundamental truth we realize as we do this work?
We realize that the brain doesn't just automatically program itself with negative stuff. It also has the incredible capacity to consciously rewrite itself with positive, transformative experiences and perspectives. Each step you take builds more power, more agency. It changes your life, not just your mind, your relationships, courage, overall satisfaction.
The brain can rewrite itself. So finally, for this section, what are the key ingredients needed for successful brain rewriting?
It definitely requires focus, patience, and willpower. It's not passive, but the payoff is huge. Those changes ripple through your entire life. Old, painful memories can genuinely become sources of strength. The brain learns to move towards growth by consciously rewriting its own programs.
Focus, patience, willpower. Got it. Okay, Chapter 9 describes reaching a state of full activation of the mind. What does this peak mental state feel like?
It's described as a moment of flourishing, like the mind reaching its highest potential, its optimal capacity. You access inner abilities that feel limitless, surpassing old limitations. The mind operates at full throttle, efficiently and powerfully. It's that peak state many people seek.
Operating at full throttle. What internal sensations might signal entering this state? What changes inside?
You might feel like a complex engine running perfectly smoothly, a sense of internal lights turning on heightened awareness, deeper understanding. New ideas form rapidly, feeling deeper and clearer than before. Like seeds sprouting and quickly gaining momentum, there's a sense of new energy permeating all parts of the brain.
Energy permeating. How can using awakening visualizations and words help achieve this state?
Clear mental images and repeated potent words or phrases act like direct messages to the brain. They help place the brain in that more active, energized state. Phrases like, maybe, now you are who you have always been, implying your peak self, act as signals, commands that resonate with the subconscious and help trigger that state.
Using words as commands. How is this peak state different from our usual brain function, which can get easily sidetracked by negativity or stress?
In this peak state, those internal and external obstacles seem to fade into the background. They lose their power. The brain can operate at full capacity, making optimal decisions, accessing ideas that seemed out of reach before, finding solutions effortlessly. Mental power feels unlocked, boosting real-world confidence.
Obstacles fade. Is this full activation just a temporary high, or can it become a more stable way of being?
The idea is that once these changes, this state, are registered deeply, perhaps in the subconscious, they can remain. The brain learns how to access and maintain this state. However, making it a more permanent feature usually requires consciously integrating it into your daily life and routines. It needs reinforcement.
Reinforcement. So what's the role of practice and consistency in maintaining this activated state?
Like any skill or strengthening a muscle, brain training is key. Repeated use of those awakening phrases, visualizations, meditations, they gradually become more deeply ingrained, more automatic. Accessing the state becomes quicker, easier, more readily available on demand when you need it. Practice builds the pathway.
Building the pathway. Is this full activation just for specific tasks, or can it apply to everything in life?
Once you reach this level of self-awareness and activation, the potential is there to apply it across the board. Work, relationships, daily choices, big challenges. The brain, operating from this active, conscious state, naturally reacts more optimally. It leads to experiencing yourself as a new, improved version, capable of using that unlocked potential everywhere.
A new version. Ultimately, what's the real significance of achieving this state of full mental activation? What's the big takeaway?
It's presented as a gift you give yourself, reaching and utilizing your peak abilities. There's a sense that from this state, nothing can really stop you because you've accessed such a profound level of understanding and inner power. It's an inexhaustible resource within you.
An inexhaustible resource. Okay, the final chapter, chapter 10, talks about a soft and awakened return from these peak states. How do we transition back to normal awareness?
It emphasizes that the return should be gentle, calm, like waking slowly from a vivid, positive dream. Mind and body gradually come back from that heightened awareness. But crucially, the brain doesn't just snap back to how it was before. It possesses new tools, new perspectives. It thinks differently now.
Thinks differently. What might someone feel as they come back? Is there a sense of loss or something else?
More a feeling of entering something new, actually. A sense that you've experienced something beyond your previous reality. The mind knows it won't function quite the same way again. That's the registration of the inner changes, a realization that the transformation is, on some level, permanent. Those awakened powers are like a bright flame, now continuously shining within.
A continuous flame. How might our perception of the outside world change after these deeper experiences? Do things look different?
Yes, our sensory experience of the world can definitely shift. You might view things with a new depth, a fresh perspective. Colors might seem brighter, sounds richer, ordinary things imbued with new meaning or significance. Simply experiencing each moment with greater attention is often the first sign of this awakened return.
Greater attention. Does returning to normal mean we lose the powers we awakened? Do they fade away?
The assurance is that while the body returns to its everyday state, the mind never fully reverts. Everything experienced in that awakened state gets registered, integrated. It becomes part of your subconscious landscape and will continue to manifest. Awakened powers aren't easily forgotten. They become accessible resources you can draw upon when needed.
Accessible resources. The text stresses that the external world might look the same, but inside, everything is different. How does that internal shift empower us?
It empowers us with the power of conscious choice. We become a new person, internally, who knows how they want to shape their life going forward. The end of this journey isn't a return to the past. It's a new beginning armed with inner resources. You can utilize these powers with confidence and hope. You've entered a new reality where inner strength is paramount.
A new beginning. What's a lasting impact on our being? What stays with us?
Something fundamental has been illuminated within. A light that won't be extinguished. It becomes part of your nature, accompanying you always. There's a sense of boundless potential that nothing can truly stop you because you've tapped into a level of understanding and power that feels limitless.
Limitless understanding and power. So what does this soft and awakened return ultimately signify? What's the final point?
It signifies fully accepting this new inner reality and living from a place of full awareness of all your inner powers and potential. It marks the start of a life lived with previously unattainable experiences and perspectives. Life becomes this ongoing journey of discovery where nothing can hold you back. You're ready to embrace it fully and move forward.
Wow. So we've covered a lot today, moving from mental silence and detachment to finding an inner guide, exploring altered states, breaking logic's hold, using narrative, confronting inner power, rewriting programs, reaching full activation, and finally, that conscious return. Quite the journey through the mind's potential.
It really is. A deep dive into the architecture of inner change, based on the ideas you brought to the table.
And hopefully this exploration has distilled some key insights for you, the listener. Maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. Perhaps the greatest hidden power of the brain isn't any single ability we discussed, but its incredible capacity for continuous evolution and self-discovery. What new landscapes of your own mind are still waiting to be explored?
A powerful question indeed.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.